Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. And something that's come up, and I bring this up periodically so that people understand this when I talk about not comparing yourself to others. And this isn't intended to push people towards mediocrity. Is it intended to push people towards achieving what they are actually capable of achieving and not setting unrealistic standards that in a way are going to be destructive and negative in their life. And one of the things that comes up all the time when people will mention other YouTubers, and they'll say things like, well, Jason, how do you feel about the fact that Johnny Candito has such a better Wilk score than you? Or Chris Jones looks so much better than you? And what I tell people is that it doesn't bother me. And if you're in that same situation, it shouldn't bother you. And so I think people don't seem to realize is that we're now at a point in YouTube channels to where there has been an evolution that has occurred there because there are so many fitness channels. People don't seem to realize that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of fitness channels now. Only a small number of those have 10,000 subscribers, 50,000, 100,000, a million subscribers, whatever it happens to be, these different benchmarks. Those are all in a minority. There are thousands of fitness channels out there that can't even get to 10,000 subs that are trying very, very hard. You're seeing an evolution of it in the sense that people who have something special to offer, something unique, some unique approach, or something about their own gifts and ability to present those gifts that is allowing people to develop these large followings now. Take someone like Johnny Candito, who in his case, Johnny is a very, very genetically gifted power lifter. I don't think people understand how high of a level of competition Johnny competes at when he's going to IPF Worlds and pulling medals at Worlds. You need to understand that is beyond the top 1% at that point. Only about 1% of powerlifters get invited to world championships around the world, particularly something like the IPF. Only a very small minority of those invited win a medal. Put that in perspective with someone like Johnny, you could be considered an elite powerlifter while being at a lower level than him. You could be considered to be a very good powerlifter while being way below him. You could be above average while being way below where he's at. Same thing when you take guys like Chris Jones. And when I say these guys are genetically gifted, I'm not saying they don't work hard. What you're seeing with some of these guys is what happens when you have someone who is genetically gifted, who works hard, and does it for a long time consistently. You're going to get results that are simply unobtainable for the majority of people. They simply do not possess the genetic gifts or even necessarily the desire to focus that much of their life for that many years towards that goal. Another example is someone like Chris Jones. Chris has an amazing ability to lose fat. Chris can bulk like crazy and then diet down and get shredded in a relatively short period of time. The guy has amazing muscle bellies and insertions just genetically. His arm insertions, his lat insertions, his medial delt insertions. Well, actually, I would say his delts are his weak point. That's probably the only thing Chris isn't genetically gifted in, his delts. Everywhere else, he's very gifted. So you take someone like that who loses fat very easily, has very, very good insertions, and he's been training hard consistently with no real downtime for like 7 or 8 years straight now. When you start using these people as your benchmarks, you're going to find yourself very disappointed. And I'm not saying don't watch these people, don't use them for some motivation, but people need to understand that if you are not at their level of genetic gifts towards whatever your respective goal happens to be, and you're not going to dedicate that much of your life towards it, don't use that as your benchmark standard. And for a lot of you out there, you need to focus on being more well-rounded. If you know that you are not going to be able to make a living doing these things, because both of these guys make a living doing this. I don't think people realize that today YouTube is a profession. You'd be shocked how much money people are making who are really putting in their work and building a big following. But that's the exception also. People who are now making a living off YouTube are the exception. They are the 1% of YouTubers. Most people don't seem to realize how difficult it is to get to 40 or 50,000 or 100,000 subscribers. It's something everyone wants to do, but they fail at. So they are making a living off of what they do. So when you look at it from that perspective, a lot of people need to step back and assess that and say, look, if I'm not going to make a living doing this, I'm not genetically gifted enough to make a living in some way off of this, and I don't want my entire life to revolve around it for the next 5 to 10 years. If they want to have some balance in their life, don't really worry about comparing yourself to these people. Just use them as motivation to look at it and say, hey, what they did is pretty good. I like that. That's impressive. I'm going to go get motivated to train a little harder this year. That's okay. Don't obsess over comparing yourself to these people, because odds are just, statistically speaking, it is just simply not going to happen. And it can cause you to develop an unhealthy relationship with your self-image and your self-esteem and even your training, nutrition, everything else, when you start comparing yourself to these people with those other factors considered. So remember, we're now at a point where what you see on YouTube isn't always going to be the best reflection of what you should be using for your real life standards today. It's just something to keep in perspective. Alright guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. But let me give you guys a bicep shot before I go. Oh, Mount Bicep.